Every morning at exactly 6:30 a.m., she would tie her running shoes and step out into the crisp morning air. The city was just waking up, with only a few early birds like herself hitting the pavement. She had been running this same route through the park for almost 2 years now, but something had changed in the last few weeks. There was this guy. She first noticed him on a Tuesday morning when the autumn leaves were just starting to turn golden. He was running in the opposite direction, and for just a split second, their eyes met. Nothing unusual about that. Runners often acknowledge each other with a quick nod or smile. But something about that moment felt different. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. Maybe it was the way he moved, with this easy, natural rhythm that somehow matched her own pace. Or maybe it was something in his eyes during that brief glance, a spark of recognition. That made no logical sense since they'd never met before. The funny thing was, she found herself thinking about him throughout the day, not in a romantic way, exactly, but more like trying to remember something important that was just out of reach. It was the strangest feeling, like her body was trying to tell her something her mind couldn't understand. The next morning, she caught herself scanning the path ahead, looking for him. When she spotted him coming around the bend near the old oak tree, her heart did this little skip. Again, their eyes met for just a moment as they passed each other. This time, she was sure she saw something there, a flicker of the same confusion and curiosity she was feeling. By the third week, she realized she had unconsciously started adjusting her running schedule. She told herself it was just to avoid the crowds, but deep down she knew she was timing her runs to cross paths with him. Every morning became this strange dance of anticipation and awkwardness. He seemed to be doing the same thing, she noticed. He would slow down slightly when they approached each other, as if he was trying to make their brief encounter last just a moment longer. Sometimes she would see him start to lift his hand in a wave, then think better of it and just nod instead. The whole situation was making her feel a bit silly. She was a practical person, not given to romantic fantasies or believing in fate. But there was something about this stranger that made her body react in ways she couldn't explain. Her pulse would quicken when she spotted him in the distance. And not just from the running. One morning, it was drizzling lightly, and fewer people were out on the trails. When she saw him approaching, she noticed he was wearing the same brand of running jacket she had at home. As they passed each other, he smiled and said, "Great minds think alike." Nodding at their identical gear, she laughed and called back, "Or maybe great taste in running gear." It was the first time they had actually spoken, and hearing his voice sent this weird shiver down her spine. Not unpleasant, just familiar somehow. That brief exchange stayed with her all day. She found herself replaying his voice in her head. The way he had smiled, the easy confidence in his manner. There was something about him that felt like coming home, which was ridiculous since she knew absolutely nothing about him. The next morning, she was running a bit later than usual due to a work call. She had almost given up on seeing him when she spotted him sitting on a bench near the water fountain, retying his shoe. Her heart did that little skip again, and she slowed to a walk as she approached. "Everything okay?" she asked, genuinely concerned that he might be hurt. He looked up and gave her that same warm smile. "Just a loose lace. Nothing dramatic." He stood up and gestured toward the fountain. "I was actually hoping I'd run into you. Well, not literally run into you," he added with a laugh that made her stomach flutter. "Oh really?" she said, trying to sound casual while her pulse was doing interesting things. "I know this might sound strange, but I feel like I recognize you from somewhere. Not just from running, but from, I don't know, somewhere else." He ran his hand through his hair, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm probably making no sense at all." She felt a wave of relief wash over her. "No, you're making perfect sense. I've been having the same feeling. It's like my brain is trying to place you, but I know we've never met before." They stood there for a moment, both smiling at the absurdity of the situation. The morning joggers continued to stream past them, but it felt like they were in their own little bubble. "I'm grabbing coffee after my run," he said, pointing toward the little cafe just outside the park entrance. "Would you like to join me?" Maybe we can figure out this mystery together. She nodded before she could overthink it. I'd like that. As they walked toward the cafe, she noticed how their steps naturally fell into sync. It was such a small thing, but it felt significant somehow, like they had been walking together for years instead of minutes. Whatever this was, whatever strange connection she was feeling, she was curious enough to find out more. Her body had been trying to tell her something for weeks now, and maybe it was time to listen. The coffee shop was one of those cozy places with mismatched chairs, and the smell of fresh pastries filling the air. They found a quiet corner table by the window, both still in their running clothes, hair slightly damp from the morning workout. She ordered her usual vanilla latte, and he got black coffee with 1 sugar. Simple preferences. Nothing fancy, but somehow even that felt right. So, he said, settling into his chair, let's solve this mystery. Where do you think we might have crossed paths before? She took a sip of her latte and really looked at him for the first time in good lighting. There was something about his face that felt familiar, like looking at an old photograph you've seen dozens of times but can't quite place. I've been trying to figure that out for weeks, she admitted. It's driving me a little crazy, honestly. They started with the obvious questions. Where did you grow up? What school did you go to? Where do you work now? But as they talked, the coincidences started piling up in a way that made them both laugh nervously. Wait, you grew up on Oak Street, she said, nearly choking on her coffee. I lived on Maple, just 3 blocks away. How did we never meet? What years? He asked, leaning forward. I was there until I was 18, so from 1995 to 2013. His eyes widened. I was on Oak from 1994 to 2012. We were literally neighbors for most of our childhood. They stared at each other for a moment, both trying to process this information. The feeling of recognition was getting stronger, but it was still frustrating not to remember exactly where they had met. Did you ever go to the old Tower Courts? On 5th Street, she asked. I practically lived there in high school, every weekend. He said immediately, I was always in the alternative rock section. You? The same section, she said slowly. I bought my first album there when I was 15. It was this tiny band called Midnight Echo. Nobody I knew had ever heard of them. He went completely still. You're kidding me. No. Why? I bought that. Same album, same store, probably around the same time. I still have it somewhere in my apartment. The coincidences kept coming. They had both worked at the campus bookstore during college, just in different years. They had both been to the same music festival 3 summers in a row. They even discovered they had the same weird habit of eating cereal for dinner when they were stressed or tired. This is getting a little spooky, she said, but she was smiling. What are the odds? I don't know, he said, but I'm starting to think the universe has a sense of humor. As they talked, she became more aware of other things. The way he gestured with his hands when he got excited about something. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. The way he listened. Really listened when she was talking. It all felt so natural, so comfortable. But there was something else happening too. She found herself noticing the way his shoulders moved when he reached for his coffee cup. The way he unconsciously tapped his fingers on the table when he was thinking. Little physical details that, for some reason, made her heart beat a little faster. Can I ask you something? She said after they had been talking for almost an hour. Sure, do. You ever get the feeling that you're exactly where you're supposed to be? Like, in this moment, in this place, with this person? He was quiet for a moment. Considering the question, you mean like fate or destiny or something like that? I don't know what to call it, she said. I've never really believed in that stuff before, but sitting here with you, talking about all these strange connections, it feels like more than just coincidence. I know what you mean, he said quietly. I feel it too. It's like my body recognized you before my brain did. Does that make any sense? She nodded, feeling a rush of relief that she wasn't the only one experiencing this strange pull. Yes, it makes perfect sense. That's exactly what it feels like. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing what they were feeling. The coffee shop was getting busier as the morning rush began. but they barely noticed the noise around them. I have to ask, he said eventually, because this is going to sound weird, but do you ever have dreams about places you've never been? People you've never met? She felt a chill run down her spine. Sometimes. Why? I've been having this recurring dream for years. I'm walking through a park, and there's this woman running toward me. I can never see her face clearly, but when I wake up, I always have this feeling like I've lost something important. Her coffee cup clattered against the saucer as she set it down. What park? It looks like the one where we run. Same trees, same paths, but in the dream, it's always sunset, not morning. She was staring at him now, her heart pounding. I have a similar dream, but in mine, I'm the one running, and there's someone waiting for me by the old oak tree, the one where we saw each other that first time. They looked at each other across the small table, both a little stunned by this revelation. The rational part of her mind was trying to dismiss it as coincidence, but her body was telling her something different. Every cell seemed to be responding to his presence, like she had been waiting for him without knowing it. This is either the most romantic thing ever, she said finally, or we're both completely losing our minds. He laughed, and the sound made her stomach flutter. Maybe both, he said, but I'm okay with that if you are. She realized she was more than okay with it. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 3 weeks had passed since their first coffee date, and they had been inseparable ever since. They met for lunch breaks, took evening walks through the city, and spent hours on the phone talking about everything and nothing. The connection between them had grown stronger with each passing day, but there was still something unspoken hanging in the air. She found herself thinking about him constantly, not just his words or his laugh, but the way he moved through the world, how he held his coffee cup, how he walked beside her with this easy confidence, how he seemed to know exactly what she needed before she even asked. It was like he could read her thoughts, or maybe her body language, in ways that no one else ever had. One evening, they were walking through the park after dinner at a small Italian restaurant, the same park where they had first noticed each other, but now it felt completely different. The trees were fuller, the paths more familiar, and the bench where they had stopped to talk that first morning had become their special spot. I keep having this strange feeling, she said as they sat down on their bench, like I'm remembering something instead of experiencing it for the first time. He turned to look at her, and in the soft light of the park lamps, she could see something in his eyes that made her breath catch. I know exactly what you mean, he said quietly. Sometimes when I'm with you, it feels like coming home after a long trip. They had been careful with each other up until now. Gentle touches, brief hugs. The kind of cautious affection that comes when you know something important is happening, and you don't want to rush it. But sitting there in the growing darkness, something shifted between them. Can I tell you something? She said, her voice barely above a whisper. Always. I've never felt this way about anyone before. Not just attracted to them, but like, my whole body recognizes them. Like every part of me has been waiting for every part of you. He was quiet for a moment, and she worried she had said too much. But then he reached over and took her hand. And the simple contact sent warmth spreading through her entire body. I was afraid to say it first. He said, but yes, I feel it too. It's like we fit together in a way that doesn't make logical sense. When he leaned closer, she didn't pull away. Their first kiss was soft and tentative. But the moment their lips met, something clicked into place. It wasn't just chemistry or attraction. It was recognition. Like her body had been waiting for this exact moment, this exact person. Without her even knowing it, they stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other on the bench. As the park grew quiet around them, she could feel his heartbeat against her chest, and somehow it seemed to match the rhythm of her own. When he stroked her hair, she felt herself relax in ways she hadn't even realized she was tense. This is going to sound crazy, she said eventually, but I feel like I could fall asleep right here in your arms and it would be the most natural thing in the world. That doesn't sound crazy at all, he said, his voice rumbling against her ear. It sounds exactly right. Over the following days, Their physical connection deepened in ways that surprised them both. Simple touches felt electric. When he would put his hand on her back as they walked, she could feel the warmth of his palm long after he moved it away. When she would reach across the table to touch his arm while they were talking, he would get this look in his eyes like he was trying to memorize the feeling. They discovered they had the same sleep schedule, naturally waking at the same time. Even when they weren't together, they both preferred the same side of the bed, which should have been a problem, but somehow worked perfectly when they were lying face to face. She noticed that when he was stressed, she could calm him just by putting her hand on his chest in a specific spot over his heart. "How did you know to do that?" he asked one evening after she had automatically reached out to comfort him. During a difficult phone call with his boss, "I don't know," she said honestly. "It just felt like the right thing to do, like I've done it before." He looked at her with that expression she was learning to recognize, wonder mixed with something that might have been relief. "It worked perfectly. Like you had some kind of instruction manual for how to help me." She laughed, but she knew what he meant. Being with him felt intuitive in a way that being with other people never had. She didn't have to guess what he needed or wanted. Her body seemed to know automatically how to move with his, how to comfort him, how to make him smile. One night, as they were lying together on his couch watching an old movie, she realized she had unconsciously positioned herself so that she was breathing in sync with him. When she pointed it out, he laughed and said he had noticed it too. "We're like two instruments that are perfectly tuned to each other," he said, running his fingers through her hair. "I've never experienced anything like this before." "Neither have I," she admitted. "Sometimes it almost scares me how natural this feels. Like we've skipped over all the awkward getting to know you stuff and jumped straight to being completely comfortable with each other." "Are you complaining?" he asked, smiling. "No," she said, settling more comfortably against his shoulder. "I'm just grateful, whatever this is. However it happened, I'm grateful we found each other." As she drifted off to sleep in his arms, she had the strangest sensation that she was finally, completely, exactly where she belonged. 6 months had passed since their first meeting, and their connection had grown into something that amazed everyone around them. Friends would joke that they moved like one person, finishing each other's sentences and seeming to communicate without words. But what others saw as cute quirks felt much deeper to them. She noticed it first during a particularly stressful week at work. She had been getting terrible headaches from staring at her computer screen for hours, the kind that made her feel dizzy and nauseous, without her saying a word about it. He had walked over to where she was sitting and gently placed his hands on her temples. "How did you know?" she asked as the tension immediately began to melt away under his touch. "I could see it in the way you were holding your shoulders," he said, continuing the gentle massage. "Plus, you get this little line between your eyebrows when your head hurts." The headache disappeared completely within minutes. It wasn't just that he had good hands or knew the right pressure points. It was like his touch was specifically designed to heal her particular kind of pain. When she mentioned this to her sister later, her sister just laughed and said she was lucky to have found someone so attentive. But it wasn't just attentiveness. She had started noticing things about him too, like how she could tell when he was getting anxious even before he realized it himself. His breathing would change slightly, becoming shallower, and she would find herself automatically placing her hand on his chest, right over his heart every time she did this. He would take a deep breath and visibly relax. "You're like my personal stress reliever," he told her one evening after a particularly difficult day. "I don't know how you do it, but you always know exactly what I need." They had discovered other strange connections too. They both had small birthmarks on their left shoulders, almost identical in shape and size. Their heart rates would sync up when they slept next to each other, something they only discovered when she wore her fitness tracker to bed and noticed the pattern. They would wake up at the same time, even without an alarm. Their bodies naturally attuned to each other's rhythms. Their friends started calling them the twins because of how eerily similar their habits had become. They would show up to parties wearing similar colors without planning it. They would order the same food at restaurants they had never been to before. They would both reach for their phones at the exact same moment when one of them was thinking about calling the other. It's like you're connected by some invisible thread. Her best friend observed one day over lunch. I've never seen anything like it. She had started to wonder about that herself. The logical part of her mind tried to explain it all away. They spent so much time together that of course they would start to mirror each other's behavior. But the coincidences kept piling up in ways that felt beyond normal couple synchronization. One night, she woke up from a vivid dream about him being hurt in some kind of accident. She was reaching for her phone to call him when it rang. It was him, calling to check on her because he had just woken up from a nightmare about something happening to her. They had both had their dreams at exactly the same time. This is getting a little weird, she said, but she was smiling when she said it. Good weird or bad weird? He asked. Definitely good weird, she said. I like being connected to you. Even if I don't understand how it works, their physical awareness of each other had deepened too. She could sense when he was in a room even if she couldn't see him. Some part of her body would just know he was there. He said he experienced the same thing. Like his nervous system was tuned to pick up her presence when they were apart. They would often text each other at the same moment, sending nearly identical messages. Thinking of you would cross in cyberspace with missing you right now. They would both get sudden urges to call each other, only to find that the other person had been about to call them. I think we're becoming psychic, she joked one day. But there was a part of her that wondered if it wasn't entirely a joke. Or maybe we always were, he said, and we just needed to find each other to activate it. The idea should have been ridiculous, but it didn't feel ridiculous. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. They had created their own language of looks and touches, their own rhythm of being together. Friends would comment on how they seemed to anticipate each other's needs, how they moved around each other in the kitchen like dancers who had been performing together for years. I keep expecting the novelty to wear off, she confessed one evening as they were cooking dinner together. But instead, it keeps getting stronger. I know what you mean, he said, handing her the exact spice she had been reaching for without her asking. It's like we're still discovering new ways to be connected. She watched him move around the kitchen, noting how he seemed to know instinctively where everything was in her apartment, how he had naturally taken over the tasks she disliked without her ever having to ask. It was as if they had been living together for years instead of months. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met? She asked. He paused in his stirring and looked at her seriously. I don't think that was ever a real possibility. He said, I think we were always going to find each other, one way or another. She felt that familiar flutter in her chest, the one that happened whenever he said something that perfectly captured what she was feeling. You really believe that? I do, he said simply. Don't you? She thought about all the coincidences, all the ways their lives had intersected without them knowing it, all the strange synchronicities that had brought them to this moment. Yeah, she said, smiling. I really do. A full year had passed since that first morning in the park, and their relationship had settled into something that felt both extraordinary and completely natural. They had stopped questioning the strange coincidences in the almost telepathic connection they shared. Instead, they had learned to simply accept it as part of who they were together. They had moved in together 6 months ago, and the transition had been seamless. There were no arguments about whose furniture to keep or how to arrange the living room. Their belongings seemed to fit together as naturally as they did, creating a space that felt like home to both of them from the very first day. I think we're meant to live together, she said one morning as they moved around each other in the kitchen, each handling different parts of their breakfast routine without discussing it. Look at us. We're like a perfectly choreographed dance, he laughed, handing her the coffee mug that had somehow become hers even though it had originally been his. Remember when we were worried about whether we'd get in each other's way? That lasted about a day, she said, accepting the coffee that was already made exactly how she liked it. Then I realized you just naturally do things the way I would do them. Their daily routines had merged so completely that friends would joke about them being joined at the hip. They would wake up at the same time, fall asleep at the same time, and somehow always seemed to be hungry at exactly the same moments. Even their work schedules had naturally aligned. He had switched to earlier hours at his job, and she had started staying later at hers so they could have their evenings together. The mysterious connection that had brought them together had evolved into something deeper and more practical. She had learned to trust her instincts about him completely. When he was having a bad day, she would know it before he walked through the door, and she would already have done something to help, ordered his favorite takeout, drawn him a bath, or simply cleared her schedule so they could spend the evening together. "You take care of me in ways I didn't even know I needed," he told her one evening after she had surprised him with tickets to see a band he had mentioned wanting to see months ago. "It's like you have a direct line to my heart. It goes both ways," she said, curling up next to him on the couch. "Remember last week when I was stressed about that presentation? You showed up at my office with soup and didn't even ask how I was doing. You just knew." He had indeed shown up with her favorite soup from the little place near her office, claiming he had been in the neighborhood and had a feeling she might need it. She had been having a terrible day, and his timing had been perfect. But then, again, his timing was always perfect. Their friends had stopped being surprised by their synchronicity and had started coming to them for relationship advice. How did they make it look so easy? How did they never seem to fight? How did they always seem to know what the other person needed? "We don't really know how to explain it," she would say honestly. "We just fit." But privately, she had started to understand that what they had wasn't just luck or good compatibility. It was something rare, something that happened when two people were truly meant to be together. She had stopped believing in coincidence and started believing in destiny. They had developed their own language over the months, not words, but looks and touches and subtle movements that conveyed entire conversations. He could tell her mood from across a room just by the way she was standing. She could sense when he was getting overwhelmed at social gatherings and would naturally create opportunities for them to step outside for a few minutes of quiet. "We're like two parts of the same person," her mother had observed during a recent visit. "I've never seen two people who understand each other so completely." Her mother wasn't wrong. They had become experts at reading each other, at anticipating needs and wants before they were even expressed. But more than that, they had created a life together that felt perfectly balanced. Where she was weak, he was strong. Where he struggled, she naturally stepped in to help. He had started painting again, something he had given up years ago, inspired by watching her move through their shared space. She had begun taking dance classes, something she had always wanted to do but had never had the confidence to try. They were bringing out the best in each other, encouraging dreams and ambitions that had been dormant. "I feel like I'm becoming the person I was always meant to be," she told him one evening as they sat on their balcony, watching the sunset. "But only because you're here to see it." "I know exactly what you mean," he said, taking her hand. "It's like I spent years being a rough draft, and you're helping me become the final version." They had learned to trust the connection between them completely. When one of them had a strong feeling about something, a decision they should make, a place they should go, a person they should avoid, the other one listened. Their instincts seemed to be perfectly calibrated to each other's well-being. "Do you ever miss being independent?" she asked him one night, half joking but also genuinely curious. "You mean, do I miss making decisions without considering how they'll affect you? Do I miss not having someone who understands me completely? Do I miss sleeping alone and waking up alone?" He shook his head. "No, I don't miss any of that. This isn't dependence. This is partnership." She realized he was right. They hadn't lost their individuality by becoming so connected. Instead, they had found a way to be completely themselves while also being part of something larger. She was still her own person, with her own thoughts and dreams and goals. But now she was also part of them, and that felt like the most natural thing in the world. As she lay in bed that night, listening to him breathe beside her, she thought about how far they had come from that first morning in the park. The mysterious pull she had felt toward a stranger had grown into the deepest love she had ever experienced. The inexplicable connection had become the foundation of a life that felt like it had always been Meant to be. Thank you, she whispered. Into the darkness, not sure if she was talking to him, to the universe, or to whatever force had brought them together. For what? He murmured sleepily. For finding me. She said simply. Always, he said, and she knew he understood exactly what she meant. They had stopped trying to explain their connection to other people. Some things were too deep, too personal, too mysterious to put into words. What mattered was that they had found each other, that they had been brave enough to trust what their hearts and bodies had been telling them. From the very beginning, they were exactly where they were meant to be, with exactly the person they were meant to be with, and that was everything.